Okay, so we're recording the Zoom. So
It's not like yours.
how do I do that? I don't know. We'll have to figure that out, not during the share, but we'll figure it out. Okay. So I would like to let me just pass out the handouts here for those who, if you want to learn inside together with me, you could, you don't have to, it's optional, but I have all the text here as well. There's two of them. So they're going to be two different sources that we're learning today. And so today's share, there's so much in Parshas Shemos. It's like in some Parshas, we have to figure out what to talk about. In some Parshas, I have to figure out what not to talk about. And Parshas Shemos is one of those. There's so many parts of this Parsha that we could explore deeper and are inspirational. There's a whole group of people in the waiting room. Come on, get everybody in. But so I chose just one topic this week, and that is the symbolism of the burning bush, of the Sneh. Now, I chose two different pieces, just simply because whenever I prepare the shir, I always look for things that speak to me, that inspire me. I figure if I'm inspired by them, if I'm moved by them, then others will be as well. So hopefully the inspiration that I felt will translate to everybody as well. So Hashem speaks to Moshe Rabbeinu. This is Hashem's inaugural sort of address to Moshe Rabbeinu. And this is really the beginning of the redemption process. So clearly, the fact that Hashem chose to speak to him in such a manner, in a manner that we don't see is duplicated ever again, where Hashem speaks to him in this burning bush and a thorn bush of all things, and Einenu Uchol, it's burning and yet it's not consumed. So obviously, if Hashem is speaking to Moshe Rabbeinu for the first time and giving him the instructions of redeeming Klal Yisrael, which wasn't just a minor event in our history, it's an event that we speak about Ad Hayom Hazeh, Yetzias Mitzrayim. It's in our mezuzah, it's in our tefillin, it's in our kiddush, it's in our davening. I mean, we are consumed with Yetzias Mitzrayim, and we talk about this, and for a very good reason and what it represents. So obviously, if this is the first vision that Moshe Rabbeinu has, or the first communication that Moshe Rabbeinu has with Hashem, and it's about Moshe Rabbeinu redeeming Klal Yisrael, obviously it's laden with symbolism. And Shivim Panim LaTorah, there are different interpretations. They're all correct at various levels. This is the beauty of learning Torah, is that we see sometimes two completely different opinions, and our minds have to sort of be expansive to hold both ideas, because at various levels, they're both true. The Torah speaks to us at a myriad of different levels. So I chose two examples from the world of Chassidus, or two commentators from the world of Chassidus, to try to explain what is the symbolic nature of this burning bush, the thorns that aren't consumed, etc. So let's take the first one. And the first one you'll see in the sources, which I'll bring up the sources soon on the screen for those on Zoom, is the Degel Machane Ephraim. But I want to give an introduction to the Degel Machane Ephraim, who he was, and his explanation. I'm going to say it on the outside, and then we'll learn it together on the inside for those of you who want to do that. So the Degel Machane Ephraim, one of the great early Hasidic masters, he was the grandson of the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov had one child, a daughter, and this was his daughter's son, okay? And many of his teachings, he quotes his grandfather, the Baal Shem Tov, including on this one. So we will have the Baal Shem Tov's interpretation of the burning bush from his grandson, the Degel Machane Ephraim. And what so struck me when I was learning this, when preparing for the shir, is for those who listen to the Tanya shir on Thursdays, or those who come to the Tanya shir on Thursdays, those who are even familiar with the Alter Rebbe's Tanya, the first Chabad Rebbe, his sort of path in Avodas Hashem, it's very connected. And the Alter Rebbe writes in the Tanya that this book, this path that he created, it's 53 chapters, and we do it every Thursday morning for those who want to come to Tanya. I don't mean to give myself a shameless plug, but it connects with the Parsha. The Alter Rebbe writes in the very introduction of the Tanya that the whole Tanya is based upon teachings of his masters, his teachers, and one of them is the Baal Shem Tov. And when we see this Baal Shem Tov, we see this really personifies sort of the foundation of the Alter Rebbe's path in Avodas Hashem, how the Baal Shem Tov explains the Sneh. So let me just take a step back for a second and explain the Alter Rebbe's sort of derech and Avodas Hashem very, very briefly, and we'll see how that is symbolized in the Sneh and why Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu so many of these. It's not just the symbolism of the burning bush, but Hashem tells him, don't come any closer, right? Moshe Rabbeinu sees the burning bush and he wants to come closer to inspect it because it's this major phenomena that it's burning and it's not consumed. And Hashem tells him, no, don't come any closer. Why not? Why does Hashem tell him, don't come closer? And then Hashem tells him, remove your shoes. What's the idea of removing the shoes? And why the place where you are standing is Kodesh? Why is the place where he's standing Kodesh? The burning bush, we understand, is that's holy, that's Kodesh. That's you're having this godly revelation where the bush is burning and not being consumed. But why where Moshe Rabbeinu is standing? Why is that place Kodesh? What is Hashem telling him? What is this symbolism here? So let's take a step back for a moment and sort of examine just the Alter Rebbe's path in Avodas Hashem. Again, very briefly, the Alter Rebbe spends 53 chapters on this, so I'm doing it in sort of a nutshell. But in the Alter Rebbe's vision, there are two types of Jews. There is the tzaddik, the perfect tzaddik, and that's extremely rare, a handful in a generation. That's not who most of us are or have the capacity to be. And the tzaddik is one who is able to completely and totally transform his animalistic consciousness so that he's working with almost two godly souls, the godly soul and then the animal soul, which is completely transformed. So therefore, the tzaddik no longer deals with the struggles, the spiritual struggles or the innate internal struggles of animalistic consciousness, of ego, of negative desires, of anger, whatever it may be, all of the personality flaws that are sort of embedded in our consciousness and in our personality, the tzaddik has been able to completely and totally transform them. Whereas the Beinoni, the Alter Rebbe says, the average person, which is all of us, the intermediate person, is somebody who is his or her loftiest goal, his or her greatest potential is simply behavior control, that we're able to control our negative behaviors, our negative inclinations, the negativity that is within us, so that it never manifests itself externally. But the struggles are always there. See, the tzaddik no longer struggles, but the Beinoni, meaning all of us, the greatest place where we can reach, the greatest goal, the loftiest of spiritual heights, is that any of that negativity that is internal, we don't allow it to come out to manifest itself in our thought, speech, and action. It's knocking at the door. The struggles are still there. So the Alter Rebbe writes, and he writes specifically in chapter 27 of Tanya, the Alter Rebbe deals specifically with intrusive thoughts during davening. And this is something that we all struggle with. What happens when I have, and we're going to connect this to the burning bush in a second, we'll see. What happens when I have these intrusive thoughts, these negative thoughts during davening, or just intrusive thoughts? I'm in the middle of Shemona Esrei and I start thinking about my the errands that I have to do, or my responsibilities that are coming up. I'm in the middle of Shemona Esrei, and yet my mind starts wandering, and we get dejected by that. Here I am, I'm davening for 30, 40 years, and I'm trying to have a little bit of kavanah, and I'm working on myself spiritually, and yet I still have these same intrusive and sometimes even negative thoughts. And the Alter Rebbe says, don't get dejected by that. To the contrary, that's the fact that you're serving Hashem with passion, the fact that you are davening with a little bit of inspiration and you feel that inspiration and you feel that passion, and yet nevertheless, these intrusive thoughts come. That's part of our struggle. No matter how passionate, no matter how fiery our Avodas Hashem is, for the Beinoni, for the average person, for us, we're always going to have that struggle. And that's not something to be dejected about. That is our Avodas Hashem. Our finish line, so to speak, even though there is never any spiritual finish line, we're always striving to grow, is not to rid ourselves of any internal struggle. That is only for the tzaddik. So the Alter Rebbe writes, so when we're still struggling, we're still having intrusive thoughts during davening, whatever it may be, whatever negativity we're still having within ourselves, that's not a reason for dejection or depression or feeling that we're some kind of spiritual failure. To the contrary, Hashem created us to struggle. The struggle is glorious. Now, we're not meant to succumb to the struggle, and sometimes we do. But to get dejected and depressed because we still struggle spiritually, because we haven't reached that place where I can just serve Hashem with passion and joy and not feel any negativity, not feel any jealousy or any anger or any taivas or any of the negativity that I have, says the Alter Rebbe, that should not be our goal. That's the goal of the tzaddik. And what's fascinating is what Alter Rebbe writes, when it comes to intrusive thoughts during davening, the tzaddik can elevate them. But for us, we shouldn't even try to elevate them. We should just try to push them away. Okay, so this is the Alter Rebbe. This is just one idea or one concept behind the Alter Rebbe's Atanya. Let's take a look at how the Degel Machane Ephraim sees the burning bush. So I'm going to share the screen with those of you who are on Zoom and those of you who are here in person. You could, let's see, okay. You could follow along inside. So this is the Degel Machane Ephraim. We're in the middle of the right-hand column. It says Zehu Sha'amar. Zehu Sha'amar HaKasuv. And let's take a look at how the Degel Machane Ephraim sees. If you want to follow along, it's here. Middle of the right-hand column, Zehu Sha'amar HaKasuv. V'yarei lav malach Hashem b'levas eish meteicha Sneh. Do you see that? It should be like right there in the middle, the right-hand side. Okay. So the pasuk says that Moshe sees the Malach Hashem, he sees Hashem's presence in this fiery thorn bush. And just, we're sort of in the middle of the piece. The Degel Machane Ephraim speaks about exactly this idea that we were saying before. If a person has intrusive thoughts, he says, those are the thorns. This is the symbolism behind the thorn bush. So let's see what he says. What's the fire? What's the thorns? He says, what does Moshe Rabbeinu see? Hainu, b'teich avaydasai b'hislavus eish b'dveikis gadol b'aloi hasneh. The thorn, the fire represents our passion in Avodas Hashem. Hashem is giving Moshe Rabbeinu a vision right now of the spiritual Aveda of the Jewish people that they are about to begin. The whole revelation or the whole experience of Yetzias Mitzrayim was in order to bring us to Matan Torah so that we should be, this is the birth of Am Yisrael, this is the birth of our service to Hashem, this is the birth of who we are meant to be. And so in our own Avodas Hashem, the fire represents our own passion, our own fire of a dasa b'hislavus eish. Our Avodas Hashem, when it's on fire, when we feel passion. Ubdveikis gadol, we feel tremendous connection. In other words, those moments of Aveda, those moments of tefillah, that we truly feel connected, that we feel inspired. And nevertheless, and nevertheless, in the midst of my inspiration, in the midst of my davening, let's say, in the midst of my Aveda, in the midst of my passion, there's thorns there. There's negativity there, my own intrusive thoughts. So what Moshe Rabbeinu can understand is, why does the passion not consume the thorns? Seemingly, if I'm serving Hashem with passion, if I'm serving Hashem and I'm on fire and I feel the desire and I feel the connection, that should obliterate all of my internal negativity. That should consume my anger issues, my jealousy issues, my lashon hara issues, whatever issues that I particularly deal with. We all have our own unique sort of negative inclinations that are tailor-made for us. So Moshe Rabbeinu sees the fire and he understands the message. The fire represents the passion. The fire represents the weight of the Jew. But why are the thorns not being consumed? Why is the negativity not being consumed? Vayomer Moshe Asuranan. Moshe says, I will turn to this. Moshe is saying Moshe is saying I will turn to this means something else entirely, he says, or on a deeper level. I will turn away my thoughts from these intrusive thoughts. I'll push them away. And I will remove all of the negativity from my mind that disturbs my mind during davening. And yet, nevertheless, even when we attempt to do that, the thorns are not consumed. The thorns are still there. Hainu, and this is what he's saying. Hainu shetama ma'ed, Moshe Rabbeinu's questioning. How is it possible to have an intrusive thought when I'm in the middle of passionately serving Hashem? How is it possible that those intrusive thoughts don't become consumed in the fire of my Avodas Hashem? Why am I still having any of this negativity within me? Because it should be that these thorns, the negative aspects of my personality, my own negativity, my ego, my anger, whatever it may be, that should be consumed in my passion. Ubatzol kala klippas, and all the negativity should be nullified. The kal machshava zaris, and all of those intrusive thoughts. When I'm serving Hashem with passion, behevel piva kadosh b'islavusai. When I am serving Hashem with passion, when I'm davening with a passion, the gadol dveikusei b'Hashem yizmarach, and I'm connecting myself to Hashem. Why does that not consume the thorns? Why does the fire of my passion not consume the thorns of my own negativity? V'yar Hashem kisar lireis, and Hashem sees this is Moshe Rabbeinu's question. Hashem sees that Moshe Rabbeinu goes to turn to see what's happening. That Hashem, out of His great kindness, miyar v'yar Hashem kisar lireis, sees that Moshe Rabbeinu is inquiring about this. That Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't understand the symbolism. He doesn't understand how is it possible that there's still thorns if we're serving Hashem with fire. That Moshe Rabbeinu desires to understand. And therefore Hashem immediately gives him the secret. Hashem calls out to him from amongst the thorns. Meaning Hashem is revealing to him this foundational understanding of our own Avodas Hashem. That is that no matter how much passion we have, we're still going to have thorns. We're still going to be struggling. Now, when the tzaddik has these machshavas zaras, the Alter Rebbe writes about this in Tanya, that when the tzaddik has intrusive thoughts during davening, why is the tzaddik having any intrusive thoughts? After all, he's completely refined any negativity. The intrusive thoughts from the tzaddik actually come from us. That our machshavas zaras, and the tzaddik is able to elevate them. But says the Alter Rebbe that for us, we shouldn't try to engage in these intrusive thoughts and try to elevate them. We should try to push them away. But we should never get depressed or dejected that the negativity is still here, that the struggle is still here. Don't get dejected by your spiritual struggle. To the contrary, no matter how passionate you may be, no matter how much fire you may be, no matter how much connection you may have, if you're not the tzaddik, you're going to struggle. That is our destiny. And that struggle is beloved by Hashem, just like the Avodah of the tzaddik. It's not less than, to the contrary. But makom shemali tshuva aimdim afilu tzadikim gemurim yichem amidba, where the Baal Tshuva stands, even the greatest tzaddik cannot stand there, because the tzaddik doesn't have to deal with intrusive thoughts. He has his own Avodah, but we shouldn't think ours is less than. So Hashem tells him, "Shal nalecha mi'al raglecha, remove your shoes." What does that mean? Hainu shiur lahaser harama esan hamachshavos lahavi esim lebechinas hatev ledafkim l'shorsham. So here the Degel Machne Ephraim is giving the version for the tzaddik. What should the tzaddik do? Removing the shoes. The shoes represent the negativity. The tzaddik is meant to take this when he experiences negativity, and to a certain extent, even though we're not the tzaddik, we could relate this to ourselves as well. When the tzaddik experiences this negativity, he's meant to remove it and elevate it. The place where you are standing is holy. This is a critical line, because the place that you are standing, where is Moshe Rabbeinu standing? He's standing on dirt, on mud, on sand, on earth, on grime, on rocks. Moshe Rabbeinu's, the place where he is standing, what Hashem is telling him, Hashem's not just telling Moshe Rabbeinu, Hashem is telling every one of us. We should not think that the struggle makes us any less than. To the contrary, the place where you are right now, meaning that you're battling, you're struggling, Admas Kodeshu, that itself is holy. There's no less than. The struggle that you're going through is a holy struggle. And it's your mission in life. The truth is, don't get dejected by the fact that you still have thorns, that they're not being consumed by the fire. To the contrary, the fact that you still have thorns is a makom kadosh. Those thorns are holy also. Their negativity, their anger, their desires, their intrusive thoughts, whatever those thorns are. But those thorns give you a guide as to what your life's mission is. Because the areas in which you most struggle are the areas in which you need to spiritually improve on. Those are the areas that are difficult for us in our own Avodas Hashem, are specifically the reason why they're difficult is that's where our mission lies. And so the fact that we struggle with those difficult issues is not something terrible. What Hashem's telling Moshe Rabbeinu is the place where you are right now. You don't have to wait till you get rid of all the struggles to be holy. The struggles themselves are Admas Kodeshu. The thorns themselves direct you to where your Avodas Hashem needs to be. You may never get rid of those thorns. You indeed will never get rid of those thorns. But you have to strive as much as possible to elevate what you can. He says, Umedrega, and this with the top of the left-hand column on that page. Umedrega Kadesha, you are on a lofty level. Just the struggle is a lofty level. V'tfilascha Kadesha, and you think your davening is less than because you had an intrusive thought. My davening is worthless because in the middle of Shemona Esrei I thought about my grocery list. Not at all. Tfilascha Kadesha. There's thorns there. That's kadosh. That's holy. Your davening is holy. And the Alter Rebbe says this actually explicitly in chapter 27. Like I said, we really should learn chapter 27 before we even learn this Degel Machna Ephraim. But the Alter Rebbe says the fact that you have intrusive thoughts during davening is a sign that your davening is effective. And the Nefesh Bahamas is the animalistic consciousness, which is losing the battle because you're davening, you're connecting, is throwing these thoughts at you. It's battling you. The fact that you're having these intrusive thoughts is a sign that your davening is effective. Tfilas kol kadesha. Your tefillah is holy. You're having these intrusive thoughts or these negative personality inclinations in the middle of your passion, in the middle of your fire. You're experiencing thorns. That's part of your Aveda. That's part of the Aveda of Klal Yisrael, Moshe Rabbeinu. And so Hashem tells him, what does Hashem tell him? Hu anochi Elokei avicha, I am the God of your fathers. But the word avicha, your fathers, is lashon taiva. It could also mean your desires. The word av doesn't only mean father, but can mean desires. As he writes, he quotes a pasuk, va'avisa tehila. I desire your prayers, using the word avisa, which means I desire. So it means hainu machmas bechinas elokushi yesh b'teich esan hatayvas u'machshavas habayim alav. Those thorns are all messages for you. Every thorn that we have is a message. So for the tzaddik, it's a message that's something that's a negativity that has to be elevated. But for us, who are always going to have those thorns, for us, it's a message from Hashem, where our Avodas Hashem needs to be directed, where my own tikkun hamidos needs to rectify. Like if I don't have an anger issue and I never battle with anger and I never deal with anger, it's very easy for me to say, well, my Avodah is to deal with anger. Yeah, because that's not my struggle. But where I struggle, that's where my real Aveda is. That's where my mission is. And these negative inclinations that I have, the thorns, so to speak, amongst my passionate fire, the thorns direct me and tell me. They're the divine guidance as to what my mission in life is, at least vis-a-vis myself, what I have to rectify, what I have to refine. Hainu nitzutzin kadishin shenaflu misharasham. These thorns are holy sparks that teach me where I need to elevate, what I have to refine. And the thorns themselves ultimately desire to be refined and desire to be rectified. And therefore Hashem shows us these thorns, oftentimes specifically in the middle of my passionate avodah, in the middle of my davening, or in the middle of my fire, in the middle of my passion, in the middle of my divine connection, I feel thorns. That's the message to Moshe Rabbeinu. This is the mission of Klal Yisrael. The thorns will never be consumed. The thorns will always be there, but we have to look at those thorns as divine messages as to where I need to work and what I need to refine. I tell this story a lot. I think I've told this here also, but when I was in yeshiva, so for Lubavitch yeshiva boy, there's in yeshiva, we learn all day from 7 o'clock in the morning until 9 o'clock at night, except on Friday afternoons, we close the books, we leave the yeshiva, and we go on what's called mifsayim. We go out to office buildings and we knock on doors and we ask people to put on tefillin and we hand out Shabbos candles, etc. And this is the Seder every Friday afternoon in the Chabad yeshivas. This is what boys do. And I remember as a yeshiva boy, I have a very introverted personality. I know that's bizarre for a rabbi to be an introvert, but this is my lot in life. So, and it's believe me, it's hard being a rabbi and an introvert at the same time, and it gets me in a lot of trouble because people get offended by the fact that I'm an introvert, but without realizing, hey, this is just my personality and just the makeup of my personality. So for me, I loved learning, loved it. I had a passion for learning. And so learning, at least sitting and learning, not that the learning itself came easy, but the wanting to learn came easy to me because I did want to learn and I loved learning. I fell in love with learning. But it was hard for me. Every Friday afternoon, I had to battle myself to go on a bus and to go to downtown Miami, where I was in yeshiva in Miami. I would just remember this, and to go knock on strange office doors, literally cold calls, and ask them, is anyone Jewish? And you want to put on tefillin? This was a Kedes Yitzchak for me. It was so painful. And I never wanted to do it. I didn't want to do it. But there's no, what do you mean you don't want? What kind of chassid does I don't want? In those days, I was idealistic, and I still try to be idealistic. But in those days, I was really idealistic, and I knew this is really what I have to work on. Sitting and learning, that comes easy for me. That's not my avodah in this world. My avodah in this world is outreach, doing the thing that's difficult for me. Those are not wanting to do that was one of my thorns. I recognize that as one of my thorns. And no matter how much I grew in yeshiva, no matter how spiritually connected, those thorns just became bigger and bigger. I more and more didn't want to go out on Friday afternoons. I wanted to sit and learn. But I knew those thorns guided me as to what my avodah was. And it was to overcome my introvert personality and go knock on those doors and go put on tefillin on people on Friday afternoons. That was my avodah. So from the thorns, we can actually see where our avodas Hashem is. And similarly, in our own lives, and this is the message of the thorn bush to Moshe Rabbeinu, says the Degel Machane Ephraim, and he begins this piece, we start in the middle, that he saw this, he learned this from his grandfather, the Baal Shem Tov, that the fire represents our passion, our excitement, our connection. And nevertheless, no matter how passionate, no matter how connected we are, we should never get dejected that the thorns don't get consumed. We will always have those thorns. Our job is to overcome those thorns, not succumb to them, and utilize them as a guide as to where my avodas Hashem is. And that was the inaugural message to Moshe Rabbeinu, because this is the beginning of Leidas Am Yisrael. This is the beginning of our avodah. This is the beginning of our service to Hashem, and this will encapsulate what our service is. Okay, that's the Degel Machane Ephraim. That's one explanation. Beautiful, beautiful explanation, but it's so foundational because oftentimes, we get dejected. After all, I've been religious my whole life, or I've been religious for X many years, however many years we've been religious, and we're serving Hashem, and I'm trying to grow, and I'm going to Shiur, and yet I still battle the same animalistic, basic, ugly struggles, internal struggles, and I feel dejected and depressed. Says the Degel Machane Ephraim, that was the message of the thorn bush. Don't get depressed by your struggles. Strive to overcome them. Your struggles will always be there. That is our avodah. Okay, let's take a look at the next piece, the Nesiva Shalom. Now, we have to completely erase from our minds the Degel Machane Ephraim because he goes in a completely different direction, but also just such a beautiful explanation of what the thorn bush represents and how it relates to us in our own avodah. Those are the kinds of pieces I like the most, the ones that I can relate to personally. So let's take a look at the Nesiva Shalom. So the fire is burning in the thorn bush, but it is not consumed. Okay, so Nesiva Shalom Aleph. V'yar malach Hashem elav lavas eish meteichas sneh. So Moshe Rabbeinu sees Hashem in this fiery thorn bush. V'yar v'hine sneh boyer be'eish vasneh nenu uchel. And he sees the symbolism that the fire is burning and that the thorns aren't consumed. V'yomer Moshe asurana. I'm going to turn to this. Ve'eros amara gadol hazeh. I'm going to turn to this great vision that I'm seeing. Maduli yivar sneh. Why are the thorns aren't? Why is the bush not being consumed? V'yar Hashem kisar liris. And Hashem sees that he goes that he is inquiring. V'yikra lav Hashem meteichas sneh. And Hashem calls out to him. And Hashem tells him, don't come any closer. Remove your shoes. The place where you're standing is holy. Okay. What's the symbolism here? It says in the Nesiva Shalom. What is this great vision that Moshe Rabbeinu sees? That this specifically before Moshe Rabbeinu begins his mission, this vision is obviously critical to his shlichus, because Hashem shows him this before he's appointed to go redeem Klal Yisrael. The mashma, so the implication is shemara ezat tamud seira shlichus, that somehow this vision, concealed, hidden, embedded within this vision, is the sod, is the foundation, is the secret of Moshe Rabbeinu's mission to redeeming Klal Yisrael. So what is the fire here? So here he explains the fire in almost a completely opposite of the Degel Machne Ephraim. We'll say it on the outside, and then we'll learn on the inside. The fire, according to the Nesiva Shalom, the Jews we know this, we speak about this every Pesach, that at the time of Yetzias Mitzrayim, we were sunk into the Mem Tes Shari Tuma. We were completely embedded in the 49 gates of impurity of Egypt. Egypt was an incredibly immoral, unethical, licentious country. It was Erevas Haaretz, a lot of immorality, a lot of unethical behavior, and a lot of idolatry. And as Jews, we were completely sunk into having been there for hundreds of years already, and you have generations that are now born in Mitzrayim and never knew anything other than slavery, we just became completely assimilated into the Egyptian mindset, to the extent that had we stayed there 1 second longer, we would have fallen into the Shar Hanun, the 50th gate of impurity, and there's no escape from that. We would have been lost forever. So let's take a look at what he says inside. So he says the fire, he's going to say the fire represents the Tuma, the impurity of Egypt. And the thorns represent Klal Yisrael, that notwithstanding the absolute Erevas Haaretz, the total impurity and immorality of Mitzrayim, the Tuma of Mitzrayim, the Jews, Einena Uchol, we were not consumed by it. There always remains, no matter, and okay, let's jump inside. Let's see it in his holy words. And he actually begins with a parable. And the parable in and of itself, just separate from the Shiur, is so fascinating and such a great explanation on. He asked a very good question. If we were so close to the Shar Hanun, that if we would have stayed there 1 second longer, we would have never come out. So why didn't Hashem take us out early? Why didn't Hashem take us out a little earlier? Why not take us out a week earlier, a month earlier? Why did Hashem wait until we literally the last second to take us out? That's a good question. And he answers it. It's a beautiful answer. And with this, he'll explain the burning bush. So let's take a look at his parable. So let's take a look at how the holy books explain why Klal Yisrael had to go out quickly. It says, we went out quickly. Since we were sunk into the 49 gates of depravity, of immorality. And if we would have fallen into the 50th gate, we would have been lost forever. Therefore, we had to go out quickly. And because if we would have stayed there even a second longer, we would have fallen into the 50th gate. But if that's the case, we need to understand this itself. So why did Hashem cause it that we should stay there till the last minute? Why didn't Hashem take us out earlier? Why didn't Hashem take us out before we fell into the 49th gate of impurity? That we shouldn't have ever been into such a danger of being lost forever. Why did Hashem wait so long? So he explains now, it's a beautiful example, why Hashem waited so long. And then he's going to relate it to the burning bush. Such a powerful lesson for all of us here. He says, if we want to understand this, we have to understand the life cycle of a seed. You plant a seed in the ground. And from this tiny little nothing seed, when you look at a seed, what is there? It's a tiny little nothing. And yet you put it in the ground, and the seed completely dissolves in the ground. And from that seed grows an incredible, beautiful tree, fruit tree or oak tree, whatever it may be. He says, so think about that life cycle and what's necessary for that seed to become that tree. The kedim markev agroyin ad shaloi nishar boy kiim kista dechayusa. He says the first step is that the seed has to disintegrate. And nothing is left of that seed except for a sliver of life force that's embedded within the seed. But that seed has to completely disintegrate from its original existence. If that seed remains in its original existence, if it doesn't disintegrate in the earth, it never becomes the tree. It has to lose that old existence. And only then, when it disintegrates and it loses its old existence, can it begin to grow into an entirely new existence. Can the seed become the tree? Because growth will never happen. New growth will never happen unless it's preceded by unless it's preceded by that disintegration of its original existence. If the seed retains a little bit of its original existence, if it doesn't disintegrate, the tree will never grow. As long as the old existence is still there, as long as the old existence does not become disintegrated, does not become dissolved, the new existence can never come into being. So what's this? And in between the old and the new, there's just that sliver of, he calls kista dechayusa, a sliver of life force that's embedded within the seed that still remains. If it goes too much, if that sliver of life force disintegrates, then the seed will never become a tree at all. So there's only a tiny, tiny window for that seed to become the tree. The seed has to completely disintegrate from its old existence. That little life force has to remain, and then the tree will become a new existence. If the seed doesn't disintegrate, or it disintegrates too much and the life force is dissolved as well, the tree will never happen. But if the seed disintegrates totally, and that sliver doesn't remain either, new growth won't happen as well. So the time of that new growth, where the seed can transform into the tree, is where the seed is sort of in that in-between state between existence and non-existence. It's completely dissolved, but that life force is still there. It has to be right in that space for the tree to be able to come into being. That it becomes completely dissolved, except for that sliver of life. And we were that seed in Egypt. In Egypt, we were the seed. We were completely disintegrated. But the only thing that was remaining from our old existence was a sliver of life. That sliver of life. That sliver of life was still there, so we didn't fall into the Shara Nun. But Dafka Oz, and specifically at that point in our sort of spiritual life cycle, in between the seed and the tree, so to speak, where we were completely disintegrated, our old existence was completely dissolved, we were completely gone, Klal Yisrael was totally immersed in the Mem Teshari Tuma. Our old existence was completely gone, but we needed our old existence to be gone in order to become something brand new, Klal Yisrael, Leidus Am Yisrael, in order to grow into something new. But if we fell too much, if the seed totally dissolved, we can't grow either. He says, "V'dafka oz bein aheder l'kiyum," and specifically in that space. That's why Hashem had to wait till the last moment. He had to wait for the seed to dissolve. He had to wait completely for our old existence, for us to shed totally our old existence. It is only then when we can have a new growth and become a completely new entity. Shahitziam HaKadosh Baruch Hu Mitzrayim, where Hashem could take us out of Mitzrayim, v'neilid am chadash am nifra Hashem, where this new nation could be born, this chosen nation for Hashem. V'zeu inyan ki b'chapazayin, and since that window is very small between existence and non-existence, we had to go out quickly. That's why we went out quickly. Yatseis me'eretz Mitzrayim, we went out b'chipazon. Shakodem l'chein, because if Hashem would have taken us out before, we still have that seed. We're still part of that seed. It would have been impossible to take us out. It would have been impossible for us to grow in anything new. But Hashem couldn't wait any longer, because then the life force wouldn't have been there. That life force would have been dissolved as well. And so it's literally that one moment where we're hovering between existence and non-existence, where that seed is hovering between existence and non-existence. Shebein heder v'kiyum, huzman haroi l'smicha. That's the time that's fit for growth. The tzmicha mechudasha shel ama nifka, where this new entity, this new ama nifka, this tree could become where the seed once was. And this now, when we understand that example, Zehu Inyan Mara Hagadol, this is the vision of what Hashem is showing Moshe Rabbeinu. Hashem is telling him, this is Klal Yisrael. Shehira Kadosh Baruch Hu Moshe B'reish Lichusai. He's showing this vision to Moshe in the very beginning of Moshe's mission. Vehine Hasneh Bar Ba'esh, the fire may be burning, and yet the thorn bush is never consumed. The fire represents Keiches Hatuma, Hilchim and Makalim as Klal Yisrael. The fire represents the powers of impurity that are growing and are burning and are trying to consume Klal Yisrael. And this has been the story of our history. This in every nation that we ever traveled to and went to and were exiled to, where the powers of impurity caused assimilation and the disappearance and the spiritual weakness of Klal Yisrael. But no matter what we've endured, no matter how badly the persecution was, the assimilation was, no matter how bad that fire burned, here the fire is the opposite of the Dagamachna fire. Here the fire represents Tuma. No matter how those forces, no matter how heavy those forces of Tuma burn, no matter what we faced, Klal Yisrael was never consumed. And this is what Hashem's teaching Moshe Rabbeinu. She'enim nisrafim lagamri. We're never completely consumed. Ela nisha b'hemadayim kista dechayusa. That Klal Yisrael will always have that sliver of after we survive Mitzrayim, no matter what we go through, we will never be entirely consumed. The kista dechayusa, that sliver of life, will always be embedded within us. And therefore we can always, no matter what difficulties we face, and we can think about this as a nation, no matter what, look at our history. No matter what difficulties Klal Yisrael has faced, and we have faced some incredibly horrible and difficult, tragic details and experiences in the history of Klal Yisrael, and yet no matter what we have faced, we have never been consumed. We always bounce back. Why? Because there remains that kista d'chiyusa, that sliver of life. Va'al zeh he's Pala Moshe, and this is what Moshe can't understand. How is that possible? I have to see this. How is it possible that Klal Yisrael will never be consumed? How is it that we won't be consumed no matter what society we go into, no matter how heavy those fires burn? Moshe Tamu, what is the sliver of life that we have within us? What is it? What is that keeps us alive throughout the burning fire? He says, how is it possible that we could be embedded in that fire of Tuma? Kazu, the Afal Pikain, and nevertheless, we're not consumed. How is that possible? So Hashem answers him. Hashem answers Moshe Rabbeinu, and he says on the next page, Amnam, Inyan the kisses the Chayusa Shenimsa Behem, Hu Kamaimer Chazal. So what is this sliver of life force? What is Hashem telling Moshe Rabbeinu? And again, we could look at this as Klal Yisrael as a whole. We could also look at it individually in our own lives. No matter what we face, no matter the difficulties in life that we may go through, and we all go through difficulties in life. We all have our painful moments and our difficult moments, but no matter what we go through, we will never be consumed. We have the power to bounce back, to grow a tzmicha mechudeshes, a brand new growth. What is that sliver of life from which our new growth can emerge from? Where is it? What is it? So this is what Hashem's teaching Moshe Rabbeinu. He says, you know what the sliver of life is? K'maimer Chazal. What do our Chazal teach us? In the schus of what were we redeemed from Mitzrayim? In the schus of Amunah. B'zechus Amunah nigalu avasenim in Mitzrayim. This is what the Chazal say. In the schus of our Amunah, we were redeemed from Egypt. In Mitzrayim, we had nothing. We were completely shari shakav memtesh shari tuma spiritually. We were sunk into the 49 gates. We were completely dissolved and disintegrated. But you know what we had? Embedded within us, emunah. Remember, Moshe Rabbeinu tells Hashem, remember the conversation. He says, Moshe Rabbeinu tells Hashem, they're not going to believe me. Right? That's Moshe Rabbeinu's arguing. They have no more emunah after everything they've been through. And what does Hashem tell him? They will believe. They will always have that emunah. That emunah is their kiss to the chiyusa. This is what Hashem is teaching Moshe Rabbeinu, the makeup of this brand new nation. That no matter how much those fires burn, once we survived Egypt, we will never sink into the 50th gate. That kiss to the chiyusa, that sliver of life will always be there. And from that sliver of life, we can always grow into a brand new tzmicha mechudeshes, brand new. And what is that sliver of life? That's our emunah. Rak shorish hamuna nishabehem. It's the root of our amuna embedded in our souls. That emuna that we have is sort of an underlying strength that we don't even sometimes feel consciously. Sometimes consciously we don't feel it. Let's be honest. Sometimes I don't have amuna. Sometimes my amuna suffers. My amuna is weak. But embedded within my soul, that amuna is always there. This is embedded in the souls of every single Jew. And this emunah permeates the soul of every single Jew down to the lowest levels. And therefore, that's why the Chazal call us ma'aminim b'nei ma'aminim. We're believers, the children of believers. Nikru. This is what we're called. What does that mean? This is the foundation of our souls. This is embedded within our very souls. It's in our spiritual DNA that we have amunah, even if we don't feel it consciously. And this is what he says. So beautiful. Even if we find ourselves in a very low, difficult place, and again, we're talking personally, micro, and also macro as Klal Yisrael. The message is for both. But Hashem's telling Moshe on the macro level, no matter what situation, no matter how low the Jewish people may fall, they may be sunk into the 49 gates of Tumah. That emunah embedded in their souls is always there. And from that, they can always grow. This is the message of the burning bush to Moshe Rabbeinu. And it's a message to every one of us that no matter what we may face, no matter how heavy those fires may burn, no matter how difficult those fires may be, we're never consumed by the fires. We can always come back. We can always grow. We can always spiritually come back. To the contrary, oftentimes new growth is preceded by those difficult flames, by the difficult experiences that we go through in life. The fires of life that we go through are what empowers, oftentimes, dissolve our old existence and empower our brand new existence, our brand new growth. Sometimes, I was just telling this recently. Somebody was telling me that he was going through struggles in his marriage. And I said, struggles in marriage is not something to be afraid of, and it's not something to be worried about, and it's not necessarily even something to be dejected or depressed by. To the contrary, the struggles in marriage show you where the cracks are. And when you could find where the cracks are and you could strengthen them at their source, the marriage comes out not the same as it was before, but even stronger and even greater than it was before. Conflict and difficulties are oftentimes an opportunity for growth. The fire that consumes our old entity is oftentimes the prerequisite for brand new spiritual growth, for strengthening and bringing to the marriage bringing the marriage to a greater place that it could have never have gotten pre those cracks or pre those difficulties. Valzeh ton Moshe Rabbeinu al Hashem, and this is what Moshe Rabbeinu is saying. This is what Moshe Rabbeinu says to Hashem. Hey, lo yaminuli, they're not going to believe me. This is what Moshe Rabbeinu is saying. They have no longer any emunah. The fires of Mitzrayim consumed all of their emunah. V'lo yishma b'keli, they won't hear my voice. Because Moshe Rabbeinu felt their emunah was lost also. I mean, unconsciously, it may have been. Because from all of the Tuma and that place where they find themselves in Mitzrayim, it's impossible that there should remain any emunah left. They no longer have that sliver of life to grow forth. There's nothing for me to redeem. That's what Moshe Rabbeinu thought. Klal Yisrael was lost. Therefore, this is exactly what Hashem's showing him. No matter how heavy those fires burn, they will never be consumed. That kiss of the chayusa, that sliver of life will always be there. And therefore Moshe Rabbeinu says, I have to see this. It doesn't make any sense to me. How could it be that the fire doesn't consume the bush? How could it be that the fire doesn't consume the emunah of Klal Yisrael? That the tomb of Mitzrayim, it's still survivable. How is it possible? How is it possible that there should remain a sliver of emunah remaining within them? Notwithstanding how great that fire is. And what does Hashem answer him? This is Moshe Rabbeinu's question. He doesn't understand. There's nobody left to redeem. There's nobody that has emunah. And what does Hashem tell him? Remove your shoes. The place where you are standing, the people who you are talking about, Klal Yisrael, the place where you are standing, meaning the Jews you're referring to, they're Admas Kodesh. They will never be consumed. Marumaz al b'nei Yisrael. The place where you are standing is alluding to the Jewish people. Because you're standing and talking about them. Yisrael heim Kodesh Kadashim. They are Kodesh HaKadashim. And even a Jew who is so lost and so far gone, there still remains that koyach ha'amunah. And from that koyach ha'amunah can always grow forth a tzmicha mechudash as a brand new growth. We are never lost, not individually and not as a nation. And this explains our existence. No matter what fires we have faced, the Babylonian Empire, the Greek Empire, the Roman Empire, the Nazis, Stalin, no matter what we have faced as a nation, all those nations are gone. They're in the trash, the dustbin of history. And here, Am Yisrael is Chai V'Kayim. We are still here because of that kista de chiyusa, that emunah. Kamayim Maran, Rav Nachman Lukovitz, and this is what the Rav of the Rebbe of Milkovitz says: Shal Yehudi lahamin shehu mamin. As Jews, we need to believe. I love this line. We need to believe that we actually believe. In other words, even if we don't feel it consciously, and sometimes in my life I don't feel it consciously. I'm going through my own difficulties and my own pain, and where's my emunah? I don't feel it. But as a Jew, we need to believe that underneath all the layers of my deepest core, I do believe. Even if I don't feel it. Yamin, I believe that I believe. That in the depths of my soul, I actually do believe. But sometimes the dark clouds of life cover over the light of my emunah. When the dark clouds cover over the sun, it doesn't mean the sun disappears. It just means the clouds are covering it. And so this emunah we have as an inheritance in our spiritual DNA from our patriarchs and our matriarchs. As Hashem says to Moshe, my children are believers, the children of believers. And even though they may be experiencing fires, the bush will never be consumed. Klal Yisrael will never be consumed. No matter what we face individually or as a nation, it will never be extinguished. That kista de chiyusa, that life force from which grows forth a brand new growth, that is our emunah. And from that seed of faith that every one of us has, it is from there that we will experience ultimate redemption. And this is the message that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is giving Moshe Rabbeinu right in the inauguration of his shlichus. He's telling them, this is who you are going to redeem. Don't think they're too far gone. Moshe Rabbeinu said, they have no more amunah. They're not going to believe me. Hashem says, "B'makom shata amen admas kadashu." Klal Yisrael is Admas Kadosh. They will always have this kista d'chiyusa, this sliver of faith, and from that sliver of faith, even if we don't feel it consciously, it is always there. And to the contrary, just like in Mitzrayim, the fires of Egypt, the difficulties and the pain and the suffering that we went through was the prerequisite for an incredible jump, a quantum leap in spiritual growth, where we became this nomadic sort of a desert tribe. We became the Am HaNivchar, the chosen nation that transformed the world. That growth was preceded by the fires of Mitzrayim. What enabled us to go from becoming a seed, from being a seed to becoming this glorious tree of Klal Yisrael? It was the kista d'chiyusa. We had to leave our old existence, and it was that embedded faith that is within every single one of us that empowered that new growth. And from that message of the Sneh, we could apply this in our own lives. Like I said, every one of us goes through difficulties and painful experiences in life, and difficulties in marriage, and difficulties in health, and difficulties financially. We all have our own tailor-made difficulties. We have to recognize that no matter what fires we face, as long as we have that kista d'chiyusa, that amuna, which even if I don't have it consciously, I have to believe that I have it somewhere in me. It is from there that I can grow into a brand new entity, which is a quantum leap greater than what I was before. That's the message of the Sneh. That's the inaugural vision to Moshe Rabbeinu, so that he and every one of us should understand who we are as a nation. This is really a critical message in Parshas Shemos, which is the foundation of the growth of the Jewish people, the birth of the Jewish people, that no matter what we face in life, we can grow from it, and we can survive it and thrive and become a brand new entity, because we have that kista d'chiyusa, that sliver of faith. Thank you so much, everybody. Amir Tzashem, all those who needed a aliyas haneshama will have an aliyas haneshama, and all those who need a refuah shlema will have a refuah shlema. Thank you so much for joining me. And Amir Tzashem, we'll see everybody in 2 weeks, Amir Tzashem, from today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Rabbi, I'd like to.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you. Yeah, so fascinating. Yeah.
But the first approach, the Degel Machane Ephraim,
Yeah.
fits so well with what you were talking about 2 weeks ago.
Yes, he gave the strength.
Yeah.